At the heart of the university, there was a trio that everyone knew: Kevin, Stephen, and Dave. They were inseparable, always walking together with confident strides and defiant looks. It was a common sight to see them crossing the college campus, laughing loudly and making bold remarks. "Did you see Kevin, Stephen, and Dave today? They simply didn't show up for Professor Martin's lecture," Doris, a third-year student, commented to her friend Sarah as they walked to the library. Sarah rolled her eyes. "Doesn't surprise me. They always do that. I wonder how they manage to keep such high grades." It was a mystery to everyone. The trio had a freedom that no other students seemed to possess. They skipped classes, ignored assignment deadlines, and somehow magically still managed to get the best grades in the class. Many whispered in the hallways that they had some sort of arrangement with someone from the administration or even with some influential professor. "I heard Dave's uncle is a close friend of the dean," whispered James, a classmate, as they all waited for the chemistry class to begin. "That would explain a lot," replied his friend Sophia, looking thoughtful. "But it's just a rumor, right?" The truth was that no one had concrete evidence of any illicit activity or favoritism. But the suspicions were strong, and looks of distrust always accompanied the trio. Beyond their questionable attitudes towards classes, there was something else that united Kevin, Stephen, and Dave: their personalities. They were all extroverted, bold, and carried an air of superiority. Over the years, they became known as the playboys of the university, always flaunting designer clothes, imported cars, and luxurious parties. It was evident they came from wealthy families, and to them, it seemed like money could buy anything, even the respect and admiration of their peers. On campus, Stephen, Dave, and Kevin were known not only for their wealth and arrogance, but also for their cruelty. They had a disturbing pastime, mocking and humiliating those they deemed inferior. Whether it was a classmate with simpler clothes or a professor with a different accent, no one was safe from their taunts. "Look at Jack with that old backpack. I bet he found it in the trash," laughed Kevin, pointing at a passing classmate. Dave, always ready to join in the mockery, added, "And did you see Professor Martha trying to speak English yesterday? It sounded like she had a frog in her throat." Stephen, the apparent leader of the trio, burst into loud laughter, further encouraging his friend's behavior. "She should be grateful she still has a job here with that horrible pronunciation." Individually, each of them might have gone unnoticed, but when they joined forces, the toxic energy multiplied. They moved around the campus like predators, always lurking, always ready to attack. To many, the sight of them together was akin to hyenas circling, waiting for the right moment to pounce on their prey. Vanessa, a second-year student, vented to her friend Beatrice, "It's unbearable. They act like they own the place. Yesterday, Kevin threw my book on the ground and laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world." Beatrice agreed, and the worst part is they know they can get away with it. It's like no one has the courage to stand up to them. The general feeling was one of frustration and helplessness. Injustice was plain to see, and many wondered why no one took a stand against the trio. They seemed untouchable, and what was even more alarming was that they were aware of it. With this awareness, they felt free to offend, ridicule, and even physically intimidate anyone who crossed their path. It was as if the university was their personal playground, and everyone else were mere pawns in their cruel game. The campus was always abuzz with the antics of Dave, Kevin, and Stephen. However, every now and then, someone emerged willing to challenge the trio's tyranny. On a sunny afternoon, Lucas, a recently transferred student, decided to confront them. He had heard the rumors, but he wasn't willing to be just another victim. Seeing Kevin knocking over a fellow student's books, he approached, his gaze unwavering. "Why don't you try that with someone your own size?" Lucas challenged, helping the classmate gather her books. Kevin, taken aback by being confronted, glanced at Dave and Steven, seeking support. Steven shrugged, a sarcastic smile on his face. "Who are you to tell us what to do?" Lucas, undeterred, replied, "I'm someone who believes in justice and respect. And you three could learn a thing or two about that." Despite Lucas' courage, the attempt to stand up to the trio didn't have the desired effect. They laughed and mocked him, making jokes about the campus hero. But something had changed. People began to murmur, admiring Lucas' bravery and questioning why no one else had stood up to them. The resignation that had once permeated the atmosphere began to dissipate. Many awaited, with renewed hope, the day when the trio would graduate and leave the university. But until that day arrived, a seed of resistance had been planted. And like all seeds, with time and the right care, it began to grow. And so, slowly but surely, things began to change. At the beginning of the semester, the Department of Advanced Technologies and Design welcomed a new student. Her name was Charlene. With long brown hair, expressive eyes, and a confident posture, she stood out. However, her attire was simple and understated, in contrast to the sophistication of many students in that department. Her shoes were basic, her bag had no visible branding, and her clothes, though well-maintained, lacked ostentation. Whispers circulated through the hallway that Charlene hailed from one of the most prestigious schools in the country, an institution known for producing top professionals in the field. But looking at her, few could imagine such an origin. As Charlene headed to her first class, the trio composed of Steven, Dave, and Kevin watched from a distance, always ready to make their acerbic comments. Steven, with a sardonic smile, remarked, "Look at the newbie. Seems like she borrowed her clothes from a great-grandma. I bet she's from the countryside, maybe from a farm or something. Her parents probably spent all their savings to send her to this university. She must be a scholarship student." Kevin, never missing a chance to join in the mockery, added, "Yeah, and I bet her hometown is so remote it doesn't even have internet signal. She probably thinks Wi-Fi is some kind of food." The two laughed, satisfied with their observations, unaware that by judging Charlene solely based on her appearance, they were making a grave mistake. Charlene, on the other hand, continued her path, oblivious to the comments, focused on her goal, to learn and excel at that university. Charlene, upon hearing the hurtful comments, felt a mix of indignation and pity. She stopped, took a deep breath, and slowly turned to face the trio. Her eyes shone with determination and confidence. With a firm and clear voice, she said, "You know, it's preferable to be seen as a genuine and authentic country girl, than to be an empty vessel covered in labels. You hide behind your parents' money, but what do you really have inside? What do you have when you strip away all that superficial gloss?" She took a step forward, approaching Steven, and continued, "The world has a funny way of surprising us, and the wheel of fortune turns for everyone. Today, you're on top, but tomorrow? Do you really believe that this arrogant attitude and toxic behavior will take you far?" The room was in absolute silence, with all eyes fixed on the scene. The students, who had felt oppressed by the trio for so long, now witnessed someone confronting them head-on. When Charlene finished, there was a moment of silence before the room erupted in applause and whistles. Many students rose from their chairs, applauding Charlene for her courage and eloquence. The trio, on the other hand, seemed stunned, wordless, for the first time in a long while. Charlene's response reverberated through the room, leaving an indelible mark. The trio, who always felt invincible, were now disarmed and exposed. The looks that were once filled with fear and submission now sparkled with a new light of respect and admiration for Charlene. Dave, attempting to maintain composure, murmured to Kevin, "That was a low blow. She had no right." Kevin, still dazed, replied, "She might have caught us off guard now, but we won't let this slide." Stephen, the most affected by Charlene's retaliation, felt his face burn with embarrassment. He looked around and realized that the dynamics had shifted. "She's going to regret this," he whispered, more to himself than to his friends. Though the trio tried to maintain an air of indifference, it was evident that they were deeply wounded. They weren't accustomed to being challenged, let alone publicly humiliated. In the days that followed, as Charlene continued her academic journey with dignity and grace, the trio gathered in secrecy, plotting revenge. They couldn't let that affront go unpunished. Stephen, with a dark look in his eyes, said, "She might have won this battle, but the war isn't over yet. We'll show her the cost of defying the trio." Dave and Kevin agreed, and together, they began devising a cruel and Machiavellian plan to get back at Charlene. They were determined to regain their position and make Charlene pay for her audacity. Charlene, with her strong and determined stance, quickly became a prominent figure in the university. It wasn't just her courage in facing the dreaded trio that made her stand out, but also her academic dedication. The libraries became her second home, and it was not uncommon to see her immersed in books and notes until late at night. "Did you see Charlene's score on the last exam? She outperformed all of us." Lucas, a classmate, commented to his friend Mariana. "And that's not all," Mariana replied, "she's also been chosen to represent our university in an international design competition. She's incredible." The professors also noticed her talent. "Charlene has a brilliant mind. She not only grasps concepts quickly but also has the ability to apply them in innovative ways," Professor Almeida said during a faculty meeting. But as Charlene reaped the rewards of her effort and dedication, in the shadows, the trio plotted. Stephen, with a resentful gaze, said, "She might be the current darling, but that won't last long. We have to put her in her place." Dave, rubbing his hands eagerly, added, "Yeah, she needs to learn that you can't just humiliate people like us and get away with it." Kevin, ever the calculating one, pondered, "Let's act smart about this. If we're going to get back at her, we need to do it right. No hasty actions." Charlene, immersed in her studies and projects, had no inkling of the dark intentions forming against her. She was focused on her future and making a difference, oblivious to the danger that loomed ahead. On a cloudy afternoon, the trio gathered on the terrace of a sophisticated cafe overlooking the bustling city center. Stephen, with a shrewd look, outlined his plan, emphasizing each word to ensure his friends understood the brilliance behind his idea. "Listen," began Stephen, "we're going to play a game of charm and cunning. We'll pretend that everything that happened is in the past, and we're the new, good guys of the university. And to seal this new phase, I'll invite her to my 25th birthday party. It will be at La Bellevue, the city's most upscale restaurant." Dave, with a sarcastic smile, interjected, "And let me guess, you think she'll show up in one of her simple and mismatched dresses, while we'll all be impeccably dressed in designer outfits?" "Exactly," exclaimed Stephen. "And when she's there, all out of place, we'll film every embarrassing moment and share it on social media. Imagine the humiliation. She'll wish she had never crossed our path." Kevin, always the most cautious, questioned, "What if she gets suspicious? What if she doesn't come?" Stephen, confident, replied, "She'll come. We'll make her believe that we're genuinely trying to make amends. And when she least expects it, the blow." Dave laughed, imagining the scene in his mind. "Oh, this is going to be epic. She thinks she can challenge us, but we'll show her where she belongs." Despite his initial reservations, Kevin couldn't help but get caught up in his friend's excitement. It'll be the perfect revenge. She'll never see it coming. The trio raised their glasses, sealing their Machiavellian plan, while the city continued its frenetic routine below them, unaware of the schemes unfolding above. The revenge was in full swing. Stephen, with his meticulous nature, had already booked La Belle Vue, a renowned restaurant situated in the heart of the city's most elegant neighborhood. With a panoramic view of the city and a luxurious ambience, it was the perfect setting for the plan. "I've already sent out the invitations via email and social media to everyone," said Stephen, showing his friends the guest list on his tablet. "But for Charlene, I thought of something more personal." The next day, Stephen, dressed in a well-fitted suit and holding a golden envelope, approached Charlene in the university garden. "Charlene," he began, with a gentle tone, "I wanted to personally hand you this invitation to my 25th birthday party. It would be an honor to have you there. I know we've had our disagreements, but maybe this is a chance for us to start anew." Charlene, slightly taken aback, looked deep into Stephen's eyes. For a moment, she searched for any hint of malice but found only what seemed like sincere eyes. "Well, Stephen, I'm flattered. I'll be there," she replied, accepting the invitation with a cautious smile. What Charlene didn't know was that she was walking straight into the web the trio had woven for her. She turned and continued on her way, contemplating what to wear for the occasion. Stephen, on the other hand, watched her walk away, a triumphant smile forming on his lips. He then quickly sent a message to Kevin and Dave. She accepted. Phase 1 is complete. The meticulously crafted plan by Stephen, Kevin, and Dave was in full swing, and the trio's confidence was soaring. They were convinced that Charlene, the country girl, would be the laughingstock of the party. However, they were about to discover that appearances can be deceiving. What they didn't know was that behind Charlene's simplicity lay a rich and complex story. Her parents weren't the humble farmers they imagined. In fact, they were renowned intellectuals, but for the trio of playboys, raised in silver spoon households and accustomed to measuring people's worth by the size of their bank accounts, that hardly mattered. What's an academic title compared to a fat bank account? Kevin used to say, echoing the sentiment of the group. Dave, laughing, once commented, "Whether it's a PhD professor or a sweaty truck driver, to me, they're all the same. What matters is what you have in your pocket, not in your brain." And so, blinded by their arrogance and prejudice, they continued to underestimate Charlene, oblivious to how mistaken they were. With the goal of immortalizing what they believed to be Charlene's downfall, the trio heavily invested in technology. They hired a professional team to install high-definition cameras in strategic points of the La Belle Vue restaurant. Moreover, they hired a live streaming specialist to ensure that everything would be broadcast in real time on major social media platforms. This is going to be epic. Imagine her face when she realizes the whole world is watching her humiliation. Dave exclaimed, rubbing his hands in anticipation. Kevin, looking at the equipment, commented, "Nothing but the best to record our triumph, right?" The week felt endless for them. With each passing day, the anxiety grew, and the thirst for revenge became even more intense. They could barely wait for Saturday, the day when, in their minds, they would regain the respect and status they believed they had lost thanks to Charlene. On the day of the party, dressed impeccably in designer suits, the trio made a triumphant entrance at the restaurant. Riding in a specially rented red convertible Porsche, they disembarked to the attentive gazes of the guests who were already starting to arrive. "Let's make sure everything's working perfectly," said Stephen, discreetly checking the cameras and giving the signal for the specialist to start the live stream. The first guests began to enter the restaurant, and a sense of anticipation filled the air. Everyone was eager to see what the night had in store. And the confident trio could hardly wait to begin their Machiavellian plan. As the dining hall of La Belle Vue restaurant filled with guests, Stephen, with a glass of champagne in hand, moved gracefully among the groups, accepting warm greetings and luxurious gifts. However, his blue eyes constantly scanned the entrance, looking for a sign of Charlene's presence. Dave, noticing Stephen's anxiety, commented, "She's probably getting ready." You know how women are, they always take a while to prepare. But Kevin, always the most skeptical of the trio, let out a sarcastic laugh. Or maybe she realized how out of place she would be at a party like this. I bet that country girl got scared of being the center of attention and decided to stay home, avoiding further humiliation. Stephen, trying to maintain composure, took a sip of his drink and sighed. Maybe you're right, Kevin. Maybe she realized she doesn't belong in this world and decided to spare us all from her presence. However, deep down, a pang of disappointment hit Stephen. He had meticulously planned every detail of that evening, and Charlene's absence threatened to ruin everything. The night was in full swing when the sound of a powerful engine caught everyone's attention. A long and imposing black limousine began to glide slowly toward the entrance of La Belle Vue restaurant. The city lights reflected off the polished surface of the vehicle, creating an almost magical effect. Stephen, Kevin, and Dave exchanged glances, curiosity evident on their faces. Who the hell arrives in a limousine to my party? Stephen muttered, more to himself than to his friends. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The guests stopped their conversations and turned their attention to the limousine. The silence was almost palpable. Then, the door of the limousine opened slowly, revealing a pair of elegant heels. Charlene emerged, stunning in a dress that shimmered under the restaurant lights. The subtly draped fabric embraced her curves, and the sophisticated design screamed haute couture. Her hair, once simple, was now styled in soft waves that framed her face. By her side, a young man with an upright posture and confident demeanor stepped out of the car. Wearing an impeccable suit, he offered his arm to Charlene, and together, they walked toward the entrance. Stephen was dumbfounded. He could barely recognize the young woman he had tried to humiliate. Charlene, with a radiant smile, approached and extended an elegantly wrapped package. "Happy birthday, Stephen," she said with a soft but firm voice. He took the gift, still in shock, and upon opening a small part of the wrapping, he saw the gleam of a prestigious brand watch. His eyes widened. How did you manage to get this? I thought you were, well, you know." Stephen stammered, clearly flustered. With a playful smile, Charlene let out an infectious laugh, causing some of the nearby guests to turn to see what was happening. She then looked directly into Stephen's eyes and said, with a hint of sarcasm, "Oh, Stephen, who told you that I come from a humble family? Was it my simple and unpretentious wardrobe? I choose to dress this way because, to me, flaunting wealth is in extremely poor taste. Just so you know, my father is the CEO of one of the largest companies in the country, and my mother? Well, she's the chancellor of this university. But I prefer to keep my personal and academic lives separate. I don't like to flaunt my background, unlike some around here." The silence that followed was almost deafening. Stephen, Kevin, and Dave were left speechless, their faces transitioning through a range of expressions, from surprise to embarrassment. The arrogance that once radiated from them had now been replaced by a look of shock. The guests around exchanged amused glances and whispers. The trio's attempt to humiliate Charlene had backfired, and now, they were the ones in the spotlight, but for entirely different reasons than they had planned. They had undoubtedly become the butt of the night's jokes. In a corner of the restaurant, Patrick, the young man accompanying Charlene, a man of imposing posture and confident gaze, conversed animatedly with some guests. His well-tailored suit and designer shoes showcased his wealth, but it was his charisma and intelligence that truly impressed. He was known in the business world for his shrewdness and ability to close multi-million-dollar deals, with an investment portfolio boasting 8 digits. "Did you know that Patrick has business partnerships with the parents of those 3, whispered one guest to another, discreetly pointing towards Stephen, Kevin, and Dave. Patrick, noticing the glances directed at him, approached the trio and said with an ironic smile, "Stephen, Kevin, Dave. How are your family businesses doing? I believe our contracts are going well, aren't they?" The trio, still recovering from the previous shock, now had to contend with the fact that Charlene's boyfriend was not only wealthy but also had a direct influence over their own futures and their family's businesses. I didn't know you guys knew each other," stammered Stephen, clearly uncomfortable. "Oh, there are many things you don't know," Charlene replied, linking her arm with Patrick's. And as if the universe was conspiring against them, the trio soon realized that the cameras they had installed to capture Charlene's supposed humiliation were, in fact, live streaming their own embarrassment to the entire university. Their plan had not only miserably failed, but now they were the center of attention and laughter. Meanwhile, Charlene and Patrick, immersed in their own bubble of happiness, laughed and danced, celebrating the love they had shared for years, oblivious to the chaos unfolding around them. In the farthest corner of the restaurant, Stephen, Kevin, and Dave took refuge, trying to hide from the judgmental looks of the guests. The atmosphere around them was heavy, and the silence between the three was deafening. Each of them was lost in their own thoughts, dwelling on the humiliation they had endured. "I can't believe this happened," murmured Kevin, looking at the ground. "This is a nightmare," Dave replied, with a distant look. Stephen, the birthday celebrant, simply sighed deeply, feeling the weight of his actions. "We really underestimated Charlene," he admitted. The next morning, the campus was abuzz with gossip and laughter. Social media was flooded with videos and memes from the previous night. The trio's humiliation became the most talked about topic, and Charlene Watson was elevated to legendary status. She was seen as the heroine who finally put the arrogant playboys in their place. "Did you see the video? They looked completely lost," exclaimed a student. "Charlene is amazing. She really showed them," said another. Faced with pressure and shame, the trio had no choice but to publicly apologize. In an act of humility, they gathered in the central courtyard of the university and, in front of a crowd of students, apologized for their behavior. "We're truly sorry for everything we did," said Stephen, his voice trembling. "We were wrong, and we hope everyone can forgive us." Charlene, always gracious, accepted the apology and, in a gesture of kindness, extended her hand in reconciliation. "We all make mistakes," she said, "the important thing is to learn from them and grow as individuals." And so, the university learned a valuable lesson about humility, forgiveness, and the true meaning of character.